Ladies and gentlemen of the St. George Area Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for taking this time to listen to the candidates. It's an honor to be able to speak with you this way. Now, I wish we were in person. Obviously, our lives have changed dramatically over the last 2 months, but I'm so proud of the way that Utahns have responded. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have to be able to run to serve as your next governor. The last 6.5 years serving as lieutenant governor have been the honor of a lifetime. I've learned so much from the people of this great state, and I'm proud to have been able to represent them. For those of you that don't know me, I was born and raised in the small town of Fairview, where I'm raising my own kids on the farm that my great-great-great-grandfather settled over 160 years. I'm the only candidate that is on the Wasatch Front, and it's been a remarkable experience for my kids to grow up here south of Utah County, to learn the hard work that comes from working on a farm, and we've taken those values to public service. Now, St. George is our home away from home. We spend a tremendous amount of time with you and can't wait to be back with you again soon. But when the governor came to me a year ago and said, hey, I've decided not to run for governor, but I would like you to consider it. This was an important moment for our family. And we looked at what that might look like. And a couple of things really stood out. We believe that politics is fundamentally broken as it becomes so toxic. It's become a race to tear people down instead of build each other up. And we wanted to do something different than that. And so we also decided that we were going to visit all 248 cities and towns. We made it to 205 of those before the coronavirus shut things down. But we're looking forward to getting back on the campaign trail and spending more time with the good people of the state of Utah. Now, I'm excited for the questions that we have to talk about. What you'll find over the next few minutes is that I have a vision for rural Utah, I have a vision for southern Utah, and I have a vision for the future of our state that will continue to make us the best state in the nation.
Wonderful. Spencer, thank you so much for joining with us. We're thrilled to have you. We appreciate your leadership in your position. Let's talk about the economy. That's the big thing right now that we're all concerned about. We're worried about jobs. We're worried about businesses. So let's talk about that. And Utah really has been heralded as a powerhouse economy, really an envy to other states. What are the factors that led to that economic prowess, and how do we once again solidify that position as the best economy in the nation?
Well, you're correct. We have led the nation in private sector job growth over the last 10 years for the first time in our state's history. And that did not happen by accident. Now, I want to be very clear about something. Government does not create jobs. Government does not create economy. But government can do the opposite. Government can destroy jobs. Government can prevent the economy from thriving. And so there were some very deliberate actions that were taken over those past 10 years to get government out of the way and to empower the entrepreneurs of the state. We have something unique in our DNA here. We are an incredibly entrepreneurial state. And if we have the right conditions that will allow entrepreneurs to flourish, we'll see what has happened over the past 10 years. And that is what is going to lead us out of this economic crisis. That government spending isn't going to change that, although there's some important things we can do there with infrastructure and others, and we'll talk about those as we get to some of the other questions. One of the things that was very intentional was a regulatory review, and I know this is another question, but it's so critical to how we got here. The Herbert administration, and when I came on, we were finishing up this process of reevaluating every single business regulation in the state and finding out, does it play a role? Does it have an impact? Is it important? Is it holding business back? And it really was through that process that we were able to unleash the entrepreneurial spirit. There were close to 400 business regulations that were repealed at that time. The nature of government is that it grows. A legislator has a really good idea, and maybe it's an important idea at that time, that gets passed, it gets codified, it gets put into law, regulations get placed around that. We don't do as good a job of looking back, slowing things down, reevaluating where we are, and seeing if those things are still necessary and still work. And so that's a major piece of what we're doing. GoEd and others, the incentive structure that we have in Utah, something else that we'll talk about, has been important but needs some changes, and I have some ideas around that as well.
Great. You mentioned regulatory reform. Let's talk about that. So in 2011, you mentioned that Utah conducted an aggressive regulatory review that eliminated unnecessary and overly burdensome regulations that inhibited economic competitiveness. So what's your strategy to ensure businesses can operate without those unnecessary burdens from both local and state government?
Yeah, so I ran a private business for 10 years before I became lieutenant governor. That's what I was doing, a telecommunications business. And telecom is one of the most highly regulated sectors of the economy. And I saw firsthand some of the insane regulations that were out there that, again, maybe made sense 40 years ago when we were living with the Ma Bell and that type of environment. Certainly not where we are today. And it takes Congress and legislature so long to pass regulation and change regulation that by the time they got there, it was already outdated, especially in a rapidly growing tech field. So what I propose to do is exactly what was started back in 2011 that we finished in 2014, but we need to expand that. We need to take it to the local level as well, working with our mayors and city councils, our county commissioners to reevaluate not just the state regulations that are burdening commerce, but also the local regulations that are doing that. And I know what we'll find, because we found it when we worked through this with Governor Herbert coming out of the Great Recession. We'll find that over time there's regulatory creep. President Trump has done an incredible job at this at the national level. We need to do this again at the state level and at the local level to make a difference moving forward.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about the industries that are impacted. You mentioned telecom industry. So let's jump to that, because Utah has identified and promoted certain industries in its economic development strategy. Will you continue this? And really, what are the industries that we should be targeting? And how will you ensure that the entire state benefits from those targeted efforts?
Well, it's one of the things that I've been very concerned about. Now, we're going to talk incentives a little bit too. I've been very critical of incentives. Now, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have any incentives. We would just let the free market work. And I'm a huge believer in markets and allowing the free market and that invisible hand to guide the way that we grow. Now, unfortunately, we don't live in that world, because other states are incentivizing businesses and those types of opportunities. And of course, it looks very different when we have 9% unemployment versus when we have 2% unemployment. And so right now we need to be focusing on those industries that are going to bring sustainable jobs here to the state of Utah. I had an opportunity to go back a year and a half ago to the largest air show in the world. I met with 40 of those aerospace companies. Those are the types of jobs that have lasting employment and have a ripple effect on the economy. Data centers do not. They just don't. They don't create many jobs. They use a lot of resources. We should be more careful about what we're incentivizing, and we have to look geographically off of the Wasatch Front. The biggest problem we've had on the Wasatch Front until a month ago was that we had more jobs than people that could fill those jobs. And yet in rural Utah and in southern Utah, we aren't seeing that same type of growth. And so I've been a passionate defender of rural economies, and we have to do more on that incentive side. And again, Washington County is the place that is most poised right now for that type of growth and sustainable growth, jobs that will keep families there for generations.
Great. You mentioned you hinted at that divide between the Wasatch Front, northern Utah, and southern Utah. I want to talk more about that because the greater St. George area, southern Utah, is oftentimes neglected in what we call Wasatch Front conversations that have statewide impact and ramifications. So how do you intend to unite the state and ensure that everyone has a voice in these critical conversations?
Well, as the only candidate that lives off the Wasatch Front, I think I have a unique insight into what that is and what it means. We refer to it here, some of you do as well, as the Payson-Dixon line, and that divide that is real, and it's hard to understand unless you've lived it and understood it. And being represented absolutely matters. We often talk about representation in government from underrepresented areas. We too often leave out geographical representation and how important that is. And so I have committed and promised, it's a big deal to me to make sure that we have geographical representation in my cabinet. We'll also have a rural chief of staff, someone who is committed to working with our local leaders off the Wasatch Front on a daily basis. I still live in Fairview. I have for the past 6.5 years as lieutenant governor. I've been here longer than that, but that's a 200-mile round trip commute every day. And that was intentional. It was important for me to stay here during that time so that I didn't forget those differences, so that I could continue to represent and understand. And oftentimes I'm the only person in the room who has that that idea, who has that experience and representation. And so I'm going to make sure that we always have someone in the room when decisions are being made that are from a geographical diverse standpoint, so that those areas can be represented, and we can always remember what is needed in Southern Utah.
Great. Another industry in Southern Utah, and really in rural Utah, that plays a critical role in our economies is tourism. So let's talk about that. It's a driver in the Utah economy. That's especially true here in Washington County. However, there is some concern about the overcrowding in our national parks and other recreation areas. How will you promote tourism while ensuring that our parks and recreation areas don't get overrun and misused?
Yeah, so this is a project I've been working on for a few years, and something that I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. Of course, the Mighty Five campaign was amazing. It won all kinds of awards, and it shined a light on Utah and on our 5 national parks. Of course, Zion's is one of those that has just exploded over time and become overcrowded. What's so special about Utah, though, is that we have a plethora of other opportunities. If we were, if these other places were in any other state, they would also be national parks. We could have 25 national parks here in the state of Utah, but we have to do a better job of promoting them. But we have to have the infrastructure. And so a couple of years ago, we sat down and said, we need a dedicated fund for infrastructure in these other areas, recreational infrastructure outside of our national parks. The last couple years have been amazing. We were able to get a dedicated fund of about $5 million a year that goes directly to infrastructure, recreation infrastructure, to improve those opportunities, trails, bathrooms, parking lots, the things that are needed to expand our tourism, which will help so many in rural Utah, in areas that don't have those catalysts like Zion's or Bryce or others. And we've done it now for a couple years, just awarded $6 million in new opportunities this year. And with that sustainable growth, we're going to see these new opportunities that will be a game changer for tourism here.
Wonderful. So let's talk about, within the economy, workforce development and readiness. We saw some changes this last legislative session to the Utah public degree granting universities, colleges, and technical colleges now under a single governing body, will be soon. How do you see these reforms impacting workforce readiness and quality?
So with everything we've talked about, I think this is the single most important question that has been asked around this. In times of plenty, as we're coming out of, the biggest problem we had were jobs that couldn't be filled because we didn't have the qualified workforce to do that. In times of struggle like we're going through now, we're going to need to retool and re-educate people to get them back into the workforce in an efficient manner. One of the biggest mistakes we made as a country over the past 40 years is separating work from education. Education is the thing you do for the first 20 years, and then work is everything you do after that. Or this idea that every kid needs a bachelor's degree. It's bad for our kids and it's bad for our economy. We have amazing jobs that kids could get with a 6-month certificate that would pay them $70,000 a year, but they're going to college where they don't have the aptitude. They end up dropping out after a year or two with debt and nothing to show for it. And that's just a terrible mindset. And so with these changes, we now have the opportunity to reimagine what education is like in our state. We're putting more and more resources behind our technical education. We're seeing that, of course, in the St. George area, and you guys have been able to do there, which is just amazing. But this really is the focus. How do we become lifelong learners? How do we make sure that the new economy matches educational opportunity? And that's what we're committed to doing. And it really is going to bring businesses here and allow business to expand, because our young people will be prepared for the jobs of the future and the jobs of now. That's going to make all the difference in our economy. And it's what is really attractive, because we have the youngest workforce in the nation. That's what's attractive to businesses across the country and across the world.
Great. Let's switch gears and talk about COVID. This is a very timely conversation, as we've talked about economic development and some of the challenges there. But tell us what you consider to be the proper role of government when addressing a pandemic like COVID.
Well, the truth is that it's been over 100 years, thankfully, since our state has had to address a pandemic like this, and there is no question that the health and economic devastation that is wreaking havoc on our state, our country, and our world is immense. The role of government is to balance those things while upholding our constitutional rights. And Utah has done that as well, or better than any other state in the country. There was a report that came out this week that showed that Utah had the 45th fewest restrictions of states in the country, which means that there are 45 other states that have more restrictions than Utah. We're just getting economic news out this week, and of course, it's devastating, it's heartbreaking. But Utah led the nation in job growth during the month of April. And again, that's the lowest job losses, I guess, is the better way to say that, with a 7.2% reduction in job growth. But that was #1 in the nation. And I think speaks to what we believe here in the state of Utah. We were one of only 7 states that didn't have a statewide lockdown. And yet we have some of the lowest mortality rates, some of the highest testing rates in the country. And that's something that Utahns can be proud of. The good news is now we are moving very rapidly to open things back up in a significant way. And Forbes magazine, the White House, other groups have said that they believe that Utah is the state that will lead the nation to economic recovery, and we've already started that. The great news for Utahns is that this past week, I think we were the first state where the number of people going back to work outnumbered the people who were filing for unemployment, which means that we've already started to turn this around and head in a positive direction. And again, we're going to do what we did in the Great Recession. We're going to build things back, and we're going to come back bigger and better and stronger than ever before.
Wonderful. So with the impact that we're seeing on businesses, we're also seeing a tremendous impact in government. So let's talk about that. State revenues are significantly impacted by this. How do you plan to work with the legislature to manage the budget shortfalls and then recover that revenue? I mean, there's a recovery that needs to happen in government just as it is happening in businesses.
Yeah, there's no question that this is going to be very difficult. We live in a state with a constitutional mandate to balance our budget. It's something we've always done. It's something we will do. I was a county commissioner during the Great Recession, and we had to do the very same thing in Sanpete County. There were intense pressures to raise taxes, and I rejected that. And we were able to balance our budget. We had to make cuts, and they were hard. But that's the role of an executive. That's the role of a leader, is making those important decisions. But I want to point out that we've done something better than any other state in the nation. We just renewed our AAA bond rate. And the reason we were able to renew that rate is because we have been preparing for this very scenario. We stress test our budgets every year, which most states don't do. We don't spend all of our money every year. We have a healthy rainy day fund. But even more than that, we have a working rainy day fund, which is incredible. We don't spend all of the money we have every year. We often take ongoing money and use it for one-time projects, which allow us to pull it out. Something else that's just incredible that we've done, we pay cash for a lot of projects that most states would bond for. So we've been paying cash for a lot of the prison. We've been paying cash for a lot of our road project. And because we did that, now what we can do, and what we just did with Treasurer David Damshin and I were 2 of the 3 people that serve on the State Bonding Commission. We were able to go out with authority from the legislature and bond for some of those projects that we were paying cash for at the prison. And we got a bonding rate of 1.156%. We were the first state in the nation to be able to bond during this pandemic, and we got the lowest rate in our state's history. That is saving taxpayers millions of dollars. It allows us to free up money to go to some of these critical issues. And now we have an opportunity to invest in infrastructure, things that we've been putting off for a long time, that we can now do cheaper and save taxpayer dollars and improve life off the Wasatch Front and across the state.
Great. So in line with that, in finances, let's talk taxes. Probably the last thing we all want to talk about. But taxes are our way of life. They're part of everyday business, family. Are you supportive of the legislative changes that would allow state income tax to be used for other items beyond public education? And what other changes to our tax structure or process would you recommend as governor?
So I want to be very clear because there's been so much happening around taxes. There was a proposal back in December that was going to increase the tax on food and some services. I was opposed to that. Senator Henderson, who is my running mate, was one of only 2 Republicans in the Senate to vote against that, and we were glad to see that ended up being repealed. And so it's important that there's a distinction between there. I am supportive of the compromise that was reached. I think it was a very wise compromise that allows us to still invest significant amounts in public education, which we have to do. It has to be one of our top priority, but gives the legislature the flexibility that is needed to address all of the needs of Utahns. Again, working with the executive branch, who does have the ability to line item veto items in the budget and plays a very important role in the budgeting process. And so I am very supportive of that. There is still work that needs to be done. Now, this pandemic is going to change the landscape of those discussions. And so we're going to have to reevaluate and look at what our tax structure is moving forward. But anytime we can lower taxes, that we can reduce the rate and spread that across the base, that is good tax policy. It's good conservative tax policy. It's good for the state of Utah, and it's good for our economy. One of the reasons we have had this explosive economic growth is because we have been very good on tax policy. In fact, our tax burden is lower now than it was 20 years ago, and one of the lowest in our state's history when you look at all taxes spread across the state. That's good news for consumers, it's good news for businesses, and it's good news for the taxpayers of the state of Utah.
Definitely good news. Let's shift a little bit to public lands. That's another area where we can generate some revenue for our schools. But what will you do as governor to retain local control and better manage Utah's vast and valuable public lands?
Yeah, so again, as someone who lives right next to my farm, borders the national forest, the Manti LaSalle National Forest. My family, my extended family, we still run sheep on that national forest and on BLM land out in the West Desert. And the way that the federal government has managed our lands over times really is a travesty. They have prevented multiple use on so much of our land. It's led to expensive litigation. It's hurt our economy and really hasn't done much to protect our lands at all. In fact, you can see because of mismanagement where the fire danger now is ravaging our state, as we have seen over the past several years, and the entire Western United States. And that is specifically because of mismanagement. The good news is I've been working very carefully and closely, even with members of the other party who are starting to agree that we should take this to a lawsuit, that we should end this once and for all, and figure out who should be managing these lands. Now, we are working very close with the Trump administration to have more local management of lands, and we've seen several of these projects where they've allowed us to go in and remove the beetle kill and the dead wood, and you can see it. You can see it right out my window right now. I would love to show you where fires have burned, and they get to those areas where we have been able to treat them, and the fire just stops burning, and the wildlife are coming back. It's been remarkable. That's what local management is all about. It's not about pillaging the land. It's really about saving the land for future generations, and also being able to use it in powerful ways to increase economic activity in some of our counties that are dying, that have 98% public lands. Of course, the state of Utah is close to 70% public lands. It's unsustainable to have the federal government manage or mismanage the lands the way they have been. We can do better, and we will.
Great, thanks for that. Lastly, let's talk about water. Water is a concern for us. We live in a desert statewide, but especially here in southern Utah. And we've got big concerns about our growth and managing that. So do you support the Lake Powell pipeline? Why or why not? And what other mechanisms can the state use to ensure the water supply in southern Utah is sufficient for future community and economic development?
Yeah, so I've been unabashed supporter of the Lake Powell pipeline. and working closely with your commissioners, your water conservancy district, people down there have just done a yeoman's job over the past several years. Getting projects like this through the federal government is one of the most complicated and difficult tasks possible. But it is moving forward, despite what others are saying. We have made great strides over the past several years, and Cox-Henderson administration will be fully inclusive and supportive of that. You have also been a model of conservation that really needs to go to the rest of the state. We have so much to learn from you in other areas. Now, as a farmer, I understand how critical water is to our state. In fact, it is a single limiting factor to the growth. And with the explosive growth that we're seeing in Washington County, of course, conservation continues to reign supreme. It has to be part of what we're doing, but you are doing it, and the plans you have in place are working and will continue to work. And so really it is about developing new resources. And it's our water. We should be using our water, and we should be using it to plan for the future for the citizens of the state of Utah and of Southern Utah. And you have my full blessing and support.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I'm going to let you take 2 more minutes just to recap and offer some closing statements. So I'll turn the time to you.
Well, thank you again for giving me this opportunity. This is a critical election. I know we say that every year, but I believe more critical than ever before. We are just coming out of the greatest period of prosperity in our state's history, and we are entering difficult and unprecedented economic times. But Utah is better prepared for this pandemic and for this economic downturn than any other state in the nation. We have led the nation in private sector job growth. We have the most diverse economy in the nation, and we are better situated to take advantage of this downturn and the results of this downturn than any other state in the country. I've been honored to play a role in seeing that happen over the past 10 years. I'm the first candidate in our state's history who served as a city councilman, a mayor, a county commissioner, served in the legislature, and served in the executive branch, while also running a farm and running a business that doubled in size during the Great Recession. We've never had a candidate for governor with that breadth and depth of experience. This is about proven leadership and about taking us over the next 10 years, restoring that greatness and taking it even further. I believe I'm the candidate to do that, and I ask for your vote. Thank you so much for your support, and I remember those ballots are coming out soon, and please make sure you get those ballots sent in by June 30th. Thank you, Don.
Great. Thank you, Spencer, for joining us. We appreciate it.